One's life begins to change when their desires transform into concrete actions. You're listening to the Desire to Be podcast, where your desires for your life and relationships become your mastery. I'm your host, Devora Goldberg, and thank you for joining. Welcome to today's episode of the Desire to Be podcast. I'm excited about today's conversation with singer and composer Fraciska K. Welcome, Franciska.
Thank you so much for having me.
So just to give my audience a little background about you, you are a Jewish Orthodox artpreneur. You are also the CEO and founder of K Productions. What you've shared with me is that your journey began as a singer and composer, evolving into an international artist with over 80 released singles. And guys, for over 7 years, Franciska has also hosted a podcast, which is called The Franciska Show. It's a weekly podcast addressing crucial stories and Jewish community issues. Through K Productions, she also assists others in launching and flourishing their podcasts, contributing to their successes as well. Franciska lives in the suburb of Philadelphia with her husband and 3 daughters. So I'm excited to hop right in. I want to start off, Franciska, with your music career. Take us back to the moment when you realized that you have a special God-given gift and you were ready to share it with the world.
I love how you posed this question. So I grew up in Moscow, Russia, into a rabbi family. So essentially, whatever Judaism my parents created, which was the school, the shul, the programming around it, that was my Judaism that I experienced. There was no community standards that most religious people have access to when they live in a religious community. And the Russian educational system values discipline and extracurriculars. The arts culture is extremely developed in Moscow. So my mother was going to take full advantage of the resources and schooling and programs available. And I started music lessons at 6 years old. And then I joined the music school for children at 12, where I majored in guitar. Mm-hmm. And I started writing music. That was a side thing that my mother encouraged me to do as part of a project after completing Shoftim on Sunday mornings, which is what she taught me, my sister, and some friends who came over on Sunday mornings.
So that's where it started. And that was basically, it sounds like that was your spark where you're like, I have such a talent and I'm ready to share it with the world. When was the moment that you were ready to start producing and really sharing your music with other people?
So one little detail I forgot to mention was we also had the school ensemble, choir and dance group that I was a part of. And I just released an episode, The Memories of the Ilani Choir, on my podcast over Hanukkah, where I interviewed 6 people and took me back memory lane. And it really reminded me of how I just never graduated. I went from our studio time there, and I actually wrote music. One of my songs was included in the last Hurrah. Yeah. We toured in Israel, Antwerp, and America. And my joke became I didn't get enough solos, so I just continued doing that as a solo artist.
Yeah. What was your response of those people around you, family, friends, colleagues, when you first started putting out your music back then?
Always encouraging, always positive, to the point where I had to question myself. Was it helpful? Am I really good, or am I embarrassing myself on stage, but nobody's going to tell me that because they're just encouraging me? You know, that double side. But it came with the other side of the coin, which was we still want you to adhere. And that's mostly from my mother, I would say, or specific newspapers that would want to cover me, but then didn't after certain materials came out, certain projects came out. We want this, but it has to be done in a very inhibited way or limiting, or you have to put a cap on a vision, in a sense.
Yeah. Tell us more about that. In what way were you kind of inhibited and you had to fit a mold with your music? And you're like, no, this is kind of keeping me within a specific realm and I need to step out of this box a little more.
Well, in general, in music writing, you have song structure, you have all these different formulas you want to stick with. So it's not a new concept. And same with performing. You want to cater to the audience you're performing for. You want to be relevant. You want to speak to them, and you want to make them feel comfortable. So it's very standardized to be told what to wear or what you can do on stage. So I was exposed to that, and I wouldn't blame it on a Jewish thing. I would just say this is industry standards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's always etiquette and attire depending on where you're performing. It just happens to be if you're performing for a Beis Yaakov, they don't want you moving as much when you're singing.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be that the standards have shifted and there's more exposure now and there's the sensitivities have laxed. But at the beginning, that definitely came with that. And I would say the music videos, when I started doing them, made people uncomfortable because that was not done yet.
So what part of it made them feel uncomfortable? Interestingly, because, you know, they get to see your face and they hear your music. What part of it was a discomfort?
So it comes back to Torah and Halacha and Kolisha, which I've spent the first few years on my podcast covering and interviewing other Jewish women in the arts and talking about essentially that balance and dynamic between music being our expression of Judaism and connection to God. And on the other hand, it's so limiting because we don't have access to a full audience. When you think about a female-only audience, it's not cutting the audience in half. It's actually a lot less than that because even a bat mitzvah or any event that's just women, you're not cutting out half the events. You're cutting out 90% of events, technically speaking, because people go to events with their families.
True, true. I do want to talk about when you mentioned if there's too much movement. The fact that you were not accepted on specific stages because your body was moving too much or however they portrayed it.
Or
It's
the
interesting
skirts are
because,
too tight. It could be in all kinds of shapes and forms.
Right. But it's interesting because it is an all-woman crowd and the movement of our bodies to music is something special and there is a connection to that rhythm. So it's interesting that you've stepped out of that box and showed people in the Orthodox world you can be with your body in the music that you're listening to and performing with.
Right. It used to be two kinds of dancing, either the Beis Yaakov approved motions, I would call them motions, or you had the Balei Tshuva, something out of this world, but you had to get the training outside of the Jewish world to be like that. It wasn't really something you can get access to unless you got training from outside of the community. Now it's changed drastically, and you could just go on Instagram and see dancers dancing. And it's great. It's fascinating to just see how much has changed.
Yeah. How do you think music has defined Judaism over the millennia? And then bringing that personally, how do you think it played a role in your life as a Jewish woman?
So music in general is the soundtrack of our lives. And because Jews were dispersed out throughout the whole world, you can't really pinpoint and say this is Jewish music. You could take music from this century and say this was heavily influenced by these genres or this type of music. Symphonies, classical music. Klezmer is very influenced by the Slavic folk music. I could say Chazanas perhaps comes and has a lot in common with church music. There are parallels in every genre and from every point in musical history, essentially. But if we go back to our roots, David HaMelech, who is the composer, there are others, but he is the primary songwriter that we're exposed to in Tanakh. His whole life was experienced through writing the Psalms. And now with the war, we're reading these prakim and it just feels so relevant. It's almost like he was writing them right now. And it brings comfort, it brings tears. And it's something, prayer, music, it's something that activates deeper parts of us, which is why some people connect to it. Other people cannot connect to it. Like I heard both things after the war. Some people are like, I cannot listen to any music. How can anyone even think about that? And others are like, that's the only thing that's keeping me sane right now. And then there are people who are, I cannot listen to non-Jewish music. That's how intimately we experience music. It's so personal that when life changes are so drastic, it can affect our relationship with the music.
And how about personally, how has music affected your life over the years?
Creating music and being in the studio, and thank God I have one in my house, is like one of my happiest places. I could spend all the time here, and it doesn't feel like any time's passing or that time's passing. It feels like I'm beyond time. So I get a lot of joy. I also use it as therapy. I've written so many songs, especially since the war started. It's also because I'm sitting down and doing it. Somebody's like, oh, how do you do it? I'm like, because I treat it like a full-time job. I sit down and I write a song and then I work on the song. I understand that it's a big privilege that I get to do this. And I hope I'm able to. So back to the Jewish experience, what is it like for me? Until now, I didn't feel like I wanted to perform for selfish reasons, and I could go into that more. But I feel like if these songs are coming to me and they're giving me so much comfort, they're giving comfort to the people around me, I feel like that's what I can do to contribute to the people around me to get through these times. And I can't be in the IDF. I can't be in Israel right now. I can do what I can do, but this is something only I can do. I mean, many people could contribute in music ways, but my songs, that's something that I can do. And I feel like I have to do that, or it'd be selfish of me not to do it.
The Desire to Be podcast is taking sponsors for upcoming episodes. If you have a business that you'd like to advertise, if you have a product that you'd like to advertise, this is the platform to do it on. It will reach all my audience members, giving you lots of great exposure. Or maybe you just want to sponsor an upcoming show and support the Desire to Be podcast. If you're interested in sponsorship or advertising, reach out to me on either LinkedIn or on Instagram. You'll find me under my name, Devorah Goldberg. Thank you again for listening. You've described what music does for you. It's your happy place, it's your creative place, it's your expressive place. How has it affected other people, your audience, who have listened to your music and perhaps given you feedback?
What I try to do with many of my projects is mirror life experiences through them. So I'll give an example. I dedicated my Vizakini song to my miscarriage. I turned the Elokaina Shema song into a song to bring awareness to addiction, which is not a personal struggle for me, but it's something that really felt like it fit with the song Elokaina Shema. Until a few years ago, I only wrote music to psukim, so I had to find Jewish ideas for the songs, and it wasn't just my words. So when I share the vision for the song or what I'm dedicating it to, it brings people to feel validated, seen, heard with the life challenges they have.
And they've given you feedback.
Yeah.
How it's affected them.
Yeah. But I found it to be effective to have a write-up, a description, not just the song, not just the music video, if I get to do music video, but the write-up that goes with it. So they can get some of that behind the scenes action of what the song was meant to be and do for people.
And we, by nature, are autobiographical human beings. So when we see something, when we hear something, we automatically translate it into something within our own lives, either something we've experienced or seen in something else. So we right away translate it into our own lives. So the fact that you can give so many words to a scenario, to a song, and someone picks up on it and says, yes, this is me, and these are the words I needed to hear, and this is the song and the vocals that I needed to hear right now to help me through this. That's incredible. That's a great way for you to connect with people, to put it out there and then just connect with people and help them out.
Yeah.
Tell my audience what genre your music is.
So it's Jewish pop, and there's a spectrum. I'm exploring some R&B now, and there's some classical influences. I played with rap a little bit.
And who's your typical audience? Well, and I know it's a Jewish audience. Is there a specific demographic?
There has been some Christian also, just because of the biblical references I have. So there's some crossover. I hope they're mostly women, but I can't guarantee that because the music is online and available to all. I think I connect more with women, and I'm sure there are men who listen to it, but I don't think I get the feedback from them because if they do listen and do get something out of it, I don't think our lifestyles would support him admitting to that or wanting to. There's something very personal when somebody reaches out and shares what music did for them. So, and then for every person that reaches out, there are probably 20 more who thought about reaching out but didn't, and then all the people who just enjoy it and don't think about reaching out.
Has there been anyone who asked you to write a song about a specific topic and you've gone ahead and done it?
Yes. Did you know about this?
No, it came just popped into my head.
So many years ago, through the Tara Network, which
Mhm.
is the Association of Arts and Torah, an incredible organization, someone reached out to me, and I cannot get her pull up, Aviva something from Israel. She's this tambourine lady, and she does this circle thing,
Mhm.
and she just said, Franciska, you need to write this song that's going to bring the Geula and the Miriam, and just like, gotta do this. So I wrote this song, Shir Hashem, where the music video, I was on a horse with a stick, and it was a beautiful visual. And I would say that I actually reached a lot of children through that song also. So when I talk about mature audiences,
Mhm.
the Shir Hashem expanded my audience. And then now I'm working, I just wrote a song, The Melody of Miriam. It's not out yet, but someone said, if something worked and went, was very popular, do it again.
Yeah.
So I'm doing that.
I love it. Yeah, I heard that little snippet that you put on Instagram the other day. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. I
Thank
want to
you.
switch modes for a moment to your podcast. Tell my audience about your podcast and how it started and how it evolved over the years.
I give credit to Rivka Harris.
Hmm.
Rivka Ween Harris. She said, podcasting's the next thing. You should do it. I said, what's a podcast? She said, go figure it out. And I did. I spent a few months trying to figure out how to set it up, how to do it. Part of why she gave me that directive was because I was complaining to her about how frustrated I was with the female arts industry and
Hmm.
space. And I was going to use the podcast to create a database and network and create relationships with other women and find out what they are doing in the space and are they happy about it. And I'm so grateful to see how much has shifted over the years. Sure, these interviews are not relevant today. I mean, their background stories are, but their experience for sure has shifted since I've done those interviews for the 2.5 years. I focused on that. And then the next thing became my No More Silence series, which was giving a voice to survivors of abuse in the Jewish community. I did
Hmm.
that once a month. Most of my guests were anonymous, not all of them. And at some point, it evolved. I had a little detour where I focused on business topics, maybe 6, 7 weeks. And then my audience just wobbled away. And I said, you know what? I have something too good to just throw it away.
Yeah.
So let me go back into those Jewish topics and hit them strongly. And before I pivoted fully into all the Jewish topics, I did a panel on post-sneeze stress disorder. We did other episodes that were touchy subjects and
Hmm.
sensitive, and I felt needed a voice.
For those of my audience who don't know what SNEAS is, can you elaborate?
It's modesty. Today,
Hmm.
when it's used very often, unfortunately, it relates to women's modesty and their clothing specifically, but it also includes covering hair after getting married, not dancing, not singing in front of men, what you wear. Oh, what else? And it includes men as well, because
Hmm.
men also have dignity and bodies that they have to dignify with how they represent Torah and Jews.
It's a big topic with a lot of gray area and a lot of discussion and opinions from so many different
And
angles.
triggers.
Absolutely. Would you say that was your most popular topic that you've discussed on your podcast?
It's interesting because I asked my mother to come onto my podcast to talk about her experience she had with my sister, and we did it by inviting my sister onto the show. That episode was definitely one of my biggest ones because I brought out a dynamic that I don't think was ever discussed in public.
Hmm.
I
Which was
haven't
what?
seen it, which is the disappointment or almost despair of a mother
Mm.
who expected their child to dress a certain way. It's beyond being a certain way or going into a certain field or having a certain life. The expectation of a mother having on her daughter to look a certain way and that daughter not looking that way, and what it does in the self-reflection and identity of the mother. And my mother was in a position of kirov and leadership as a
Hmm.
rebbitzin, as a school principal. Now they have moved from Moscow to Israel, which is why I'm saying was. She's still a big mentor figure for many people.
Hmm.
So she had to find herself again. And that very vulnerable conversation was hit a nerve.
Yeah, I once heard a mental health professional said, as parents, you raise your children in a certain way because you have an image of what's the right way of life and how you want them to grow up. And hopefully they'll follow in your footsteps, but you know that they'll veer in their own individual track. At least that's how I see it. And this healthcare professional said, as parents, we have to ask the question, if your children don't follow your path, are you still going to be okay?
Yeah.
So that's a question you have to ask yourself. I
I
guess that
think the
came out
reason
in,
it was more hurtful was because my mother was in a position of literally teaching other parents of how to raise their kids to
yeah.
be Jewish and religious. But there are plenty of mothers who aren't in positions of leadership who struggle with this. So
For sure.
my
Because we
mother,
live in
yeah.
communities and people look at us and what are your standards? Is it this standard? Is it that standard? Do you have standards? Are you okay with that? Does that reflect on you? It's big, it's huge. Because
and
then there's also this
and
aspect of love. We love our kids.
and the
We don't
reason
want,
she agreed to do it is
Mhm,
because she felt like she can help others through that painful, lonely experience. And she
mhm.
did. That's what we accomplished. And it was really nice.
That's great. What was your feedback from other people who heard the episode?
Well, I've gotten emails, just mothers saying like, this is my experience, or this was my mother's experience, my sister's experience, and saying
Yeah.
like, I'm admitting this for the first time, that these were my thoughts and my experiences, but then just seeing it passed around and just shared. I think that's the most
Yeah.
flattering feedback.
People are open to hearing it. People want to hear their perspective. And I think it's kind of like it's heartwarming and it creates a sense of further community when we know that other people may be experiencing similar experiences that we have. And that's probably what you gave people by putting out that episode.
Yeah.
You have mentioned to me in the past, I try to trailblaze. Tell my audience what you mean by that
So why should people listen to my podcast versus every other podcast that talks
versus
about Jewish
mine.
hot
No, just
topics?
kidding. Both.
No, think about, yeah, your podcast. And I've done this coaching for other podcasters to really differentiate who they are. But what I've hoped to do is come up with the new thing, not seeing what other people are doing and how it can mimic that, which is really a great model. And that's how Apple came to be. They looked at BlackBerry and just made it better.
Hmm.
So my goal isn't necessarily to be the biggest or the best, but was to be new and do something that hasn't been done. Do
Hmm.
something other people may not feel is okay to do. And I'm used to that because I came in with my music lifestyle of doing things that other people may not be comfortable with, but doing it in a way that is Jewish and does go within my lifestyle and my hashkafot, my beliefs, and the people who guide me.
And it's beautiful because you give so many people a voice that may not have spoken up or been comfortable. So you have a framework where other people can speak up and tell their story and strengthen other people at the same time. How do you see your podcast growing from here?
I'm always looking for new topics. And as a podcasting coach, I would tell someone who wants to grow their show is get better guests or get guests with bigger audiences.
Hmm.
So you're leveraging that on your podcast. And the reason I don't pursue that, I've had big names on my podcast, but that's not necessarily what I'm chasing. I'm chasing a topic, I'm chasing a dynamic, I'm chasing an angle.
Hmm.
And that's what's interesting to me. And I hope that's what's interesting to my audience as well. But I'm basically chasing my curiosity. And I have to be aware sometimes I need a therapy session to help me figure out what I need to do next. And that reflects later also in the topics I cover. And sometimes I'm wondering if I'm sharing too much by going into certain topics. I've covered a lot on women's mental health postpartum, NIDA, all these things. And it's almost like if everyone who's following the topics and the themes probably
Hmm.
understand I'm struggling through this right now, or certain different things. Not every topic I bring on I'm struggling with, but
Right.
sometimes when there's a theme, it's either because it's doing very well or because I'm really struggling with the ideas.
So then you just speak to other people and then it helps you just garnish a base point for yourself. Is that what it is?
So the way I find guests, I'll post a list of topics sometimes, and people will recommend others or volunteer themselves. Sometimes I'll announce on the podcast, I want to interview somebody about that or about this, and I'll get volunteers or suggestions. And then I get topic suggestions from guests.
On the Desire to Be podcast, I highlight the innate desires that we as humans have, which really drive us to our next step into greatness. Where would you say your desire lies?
Being heard and seen, doing something meaningful with my life, and feeling like what I did mattered.
And I guess at this point, you've gotten such great feedback. You're continuing to more and better.
The problem is the more you have it, the more you need it. It never feels like you're done. It never feels like, oh, great, now I could go do something else. A painful way to live, but that's how creatives live.
But you're also answering the cry of the need of others. So if someone is in pain, if someone is in happiness, sometimes you can't put words to it, or sometimes you need words in a song, and that's what you are. That's your gift to the world.
Also, in a world that's so censored and there's so much that people cannot say or express, I find that with the life I've built and my brand, I have permission to say whatever I want. So people use that very often to bring out voices that need to be spoken and brought out. And I'm happy to be the vehicle for that, because I don't have so much of a filter or that shame and embarrassment about talking about the most vulnerable topics.
That's beautiful. When you say you don't have the shame or fear of others judging you, it comes with beauty, because you get to say what's on your heart and really express what's on your mind. What's the best way for my audience to reach out to you directly?
So Instagram, Franciska Music. If you'd like to listen to the show, go to your podcast app, and that's it.
Fantastic. Best of luck with all the music you're going to be putting out in the future. Ah, what a great episode. Thank you for being here. I truly, truly appreciate you. I'd love for you to tap 5 stars and let me know what resonated. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn under my name, Devorah Goldberg. That's where I give you more content. That's where we're able to engage even further. Until next episode, stay safe and be well.